been through the program who want some kind of encouragement and hope that the Facebook beast can be tamed. Because I know it's been quite a journey for you. So could you tell me, like, before you joined the program, what the situation was?
Sure. So before I joined the program, we joined the program to get supporters for our Fairchecks campaign for criminal record reform. And before joining the program, we had just under 1,000 supporters who had mostly been recruited during the launch of the campaign via kind of our existing audiences. It's Transform Justice, the org I work for, and another org in partnership. And so our existing audiences made up the majority of that kind of supporter base for the new campaign. We came in wanting to kind of reach new people, break out of our sort of sector bubble a little bit, and just kind of diversify our audience a bit. I think because we're talking about criminal records, you know, the statistic is 1 in 6 people have a criminal record. So we knew that there were so many people out there for whom this would kind of hit home, but we just didn't know how to reach them. And we'd never tried any paid advertising of any kind before. Well, I certainly hadn't. Someone in my team might have, but I hadn't. And that's kind of where we came to the program with.
Okay. So you had quite a small list, and you were really finding it a challenge to reach new people, particularly people with criminal records, because, like, who wants to admit they've got a criminal record? Okay. So what did you, as you went through the program, what did you learn about your existing very best activists and volunteers and supporters?
Yeah, so because our list was already quite small, and we obviously took a small sample to survey and then to speak to, we learned that our list kind of wasn't on social media really at all. Like the thing most people used was Google, but when it came to kind of Twitter and Facebook and everything, like none of our list, I mean, there wasn't a notable presence on any of those platforms. So it was no wonder that our kind of attempts to publicize by tweeting about it weren't really getting anywhere. But at the same time, we felt that there probably were people on those platforms that would be interested in the campaign, but we just hadn't found that sort of group yet. By speaking to existing supporters and understanding them a little bit, you know, we picked up a few things. So obviously anonymity is a concern. People don't really want to be posting on social media about it, even if they do support it. So that was something we noticed. We noticed that the word fair and unfair came up all the time. That was a big word that came up. The other thing we noticed was that a lot of people had a bit of a mistrust of authority and the government, and in some cases people, you know, we're talking about people with criminal records, but the point of our campaign is that in a lot of cases people's lives are disproportionately blighted by a record for an old or minor offense, and for decades they can find that they're not getting job opportunities, etc. And so for a lot of people that had transformed into anger at the system, the government, and a feeling that that the government kind of had it out for them or weren't really supportive of them, which was a challenge considering we're a legislative reform campaign and we need to be lobbying the government to make change. So that's kind of what we learned. In terms of their values, we really never landed in one camp. So our supporters exhibited both Hobbit and Elf values and really sort of straddled those. And in testing, they had sort of similar results, but actually the best results were when we kind of combined them just to try and reach everyone. And we weren't coming into this, or I'll sort of get onto the ads a bit more detail in a minute, but we weren't coming in with a huge budget. And so we didn't have endless opportunities to do big testing.
So tell me more about the tests. How did they go to start with?
So because our existing audience, so we did the audience test, and because our existing audience was tiny and we didn't have in our privacy policy permission for them to upload their emails, we couldn't really test a lookalike audience. So we were based only on a wide net and a detailed targeting audience. I believe at the time detailed targeting won, and so we went with the detailed targeting audience. This was before a lot of Facebook changes happened, which have since
Keyword
impacted
gate.
what we do. Yeah. And then I think the biggest learning curve for us was the content of the ads. I think we started out being very like, our criminal record system is outdated and unfair. Like, here's why it should change. And that comes from the fact that before we were very much speaking to an echo chamber of people in our sector who already engaged that organization, who knew the language we were speaking. And it just bombed. It completely bombed. We really were like, it was very expensive. I think we've been on call, I shared, you know, we're having £6 for like a like, or, you know, this kind of thing. Very, very, very expensive. And it obviously just wasn't working. And then we discussed how to make it more of a storytelling situation. We do have some stories on our website, examples of people who have a criminal record and it's impacted them for a long time, but it's quite an obviously unfair situation. So we picked examples that were kind of the most universally empathetic in some ways, which was a struggle for us in terms of our values as an organization, because we very much believe that it's not just the very empathetic cases that deserve, you know, a look that but it was that finding that balance between our values and what would work to kind of catch attention, which is kind of another ongoing theme in our experiments with Facebook.
And when it came to make your sign up mechanism, actually, maybe it would help for you to like literally show me what you did to start with and how it evolved in response to testing. So I think where the learning started to accelerate was in the message testing part of your secret lightning appeal tests.
Yeah, so I think we definitely saw an improvement when we worked on our messaging a bit. I think there were two for us very dramatic performance improvement moments. One of which came out of the Q&A session when Sean from Unlock Democracy, it's something recommended that we take a certain angle. So here is when we tested elves versus hobbits. As we can see, there wasn't really a statistically significant result.
No.
Our messaging. So yeah, we still were using this statistic, 1 in 6 people have a criminal record, which we've since sort of done away with, and it's still very long. But we focused on, you know, they've already paid their dues, they can't contribute positively to society, everyone should have the chance to fulfill their potential, you know, and live free from stigma. So very, very elfy messaging. So talking about people's jobs being at risk, so hitting that safety value, and then a story of some to do with family. So Gina's son David committed a crime at 18. He hasn't had a job for a while. We want people to move on so they can make a decent living and support their families. So very hobbity, but there really wasn't a statistically significant difference between them. We then, I don't think we need to see these. We did some testing with like images of people and such. So an image test, again, we didn't see a massive improvement from that. I think the one where we saw a big improvement was after we had a Q&A session and Sean from Unlock Democracy was sharing some examples that really sort of tapped into politics and sort of political feelings. And we decided to give it a go. We were initially unsure because, as I said, we're a legislative reform campaign. And so we were pretty nervous about anything that might feel like it was targeting a certain member of government. But we eventually decided to give it a go. And we suddenly saw a quite significant increase. So this one we tested an ad with Boris Johnson against a few others. This was the first one we tried that was a bit different. So we focus on a story, but we sort of try to tap into those elfie values, but also the hobbit values, because we had mixed messaging. So the story we picked is someone who protected a pregnant woman, as in the story is a pregnant woman was being attacked. Someone stepped in to stop the attack, but in doing so, I think hit the attacker and ended up getting, was praised by a judge in court, but ended up getting a criminal record for that, for, I think, punching the guy who'd been attacking. So we have the story about a pregnant woman and protecting her. So that's kind of hobbity values. And then we use the language of injustice for like the elfie values. So a combination there. And I think when it comes to this image, it was really just about finding that image that would stop the scroll. I think it was very easy to scroll past our ads before. There was nothing about them. Even if you were sort of predisposed to be interested in this topic, I don't think there was much about them that would stop someone in their tracks. And so I think kind of leaning on a political figure helped with that, and also adding this kind of bigger text sort of slogan over the image helped with that as well. We compared it with ones that were just a sort of personal story, and they didn't do as well. So we definitely found that when we, used a politician, it just really helped. So that was kind of a newsjacking tactic.
So what was this was your irresistible lure, your sign-up mechanism that was in the form of a petition.
Yes.
And at that point, what were you seeing in terms of cost per sign-up?
So at that point, let's see, that was new. So I think let's go to relaunch campaign, which I think is when we really were using, we're leaning on that. We were at £1.42 per complete regregistration. So that's a petition sign, but that's not an opted in petition sign. So even then, I think we've consistently been at around 40% opt-in. So actually it's still not ideal and not where we'd like it to be. But as you can see, we had others that were very much not that and quite successful.
Happens to the best of us.
Yes. So if we look into the October 2022 ads, we were still so here we tested a few different things. So you saw we did the Boris Johnson ad, but we found all of these ads that relied on a political figure really lost efficiency over time and quite quickly. And so we would we weren't running ads consistently. We had the political ones, and then we had what we called the sort of evergreen or timeless ads. The timeless ads were these story-based ads that didn't rely on a politician, but they always performed worse than those with a politician. So we ran them in the background so that we weren't just recruiting from one source, partially as well because our campaign is around political engagement and trying to have people speak to their MP and meet their MP. And because we already knew that our list was slightly predisposed to anger or mistrust of government, we did have concerns that if we were advertising on the basis of frustration at certain politicians, we would be recruiting people who then wouldn't be willing to take action with us if that action was something like write to your MP, email your MP. That has proven to be somewhat unfounded in that they have been willing to take action. But we've also been getting messages from people who are quite angry at their politician, but we already had that in our audience before. So who knows, but just to mitigate that risk, we've been consistently running a kind of other ad that's not political, that's performed worse, but has ensured that there's a steady trickle of people coming in who weren't piqued by anger or piqued by that kind of frustration at politicians. But as I said, the political ads tended to run their course quite quickly. So we had the Boris Johnson one, we did a Dominic Cummings ad, we did a Suella Braverman ad. So this one we were getting, these are kind of the final ones. So if we view charts, because they lost efficiency over time, starting out at kind of under £1 and then would rise quite quickly to much more expensive, which is when we'd kind of stop them. So we'd sort of maximize while they were effective and then stop them and rethink, or kind of keep watching the news for something that would work. So this was, if you remember, Suella Braverman, there was a kind of bit of a, and the messaging was, so now the Home Office believes in rehabilitation. And we were contrasting, that idea that she'd made a mistake but had been allowed to stay on, but people with criminal records make a mistake or commit one offense and it can prevent them moving on decades later.
So
and at this point, we'd also worked a bit on this messaging to make it a bit more impactful. So before that, we'd sort of been saying, sign the petition, or, one thing shouldn't harm you for life, but we made it more punchy with criminal record equals life sentence, which I think helped making it more impactful as well. But as I said, simultaneously, we were running ads that were trying different things. So we did we brought in some friends of the campaign, including Sean from Unlock Democracy, to brainstorm basically different approaches, because as I said, we knew this was working, but we didn't want to rely solely on this political angle. So we brought in some friends, we brainstormed some different approaches, and we tested a few. One was focusing on the cost of living. It wasn't that effective. It was trying to lean into the Hobbity values, and sort of it was an image of a father and his children, and sort of leaning on the idea of like he should be allowed to put food on the table, but it didn't work super well. This one did work pretty well. We got quite a lot of engagement, as you see. I think
that is a lot of comments.
If I open it bigger, we can see better. So I think what we found is the comments tended, we didn't have a lot of troll comments ever, but the comments tended to not be super supportive always, although some were. But what we found was the comments didn't necessarily reflect the efficiency of the ad. I think the people commenting were not the same as the people clicking through and taking the action. And so I think that's what the importance for us about finding what was going to work to stop the scroll, because one way or the other, it stops the scroll of the people who have something kind of frustrated to say, but it also caught the attention of people who might actually genuinely want to engage with it. So this was one of our more recent ones. And this was the first time we'd used and made it more personal. And obviously, like, we are a tiny charity. We don't have images of our supporters, partially because of our tininess, but also because of the anonymity problem. So this is literally a stock photo, which is kind of not ideal, but we kind of made do with what we had. But we ended up getting, 900 reactions, over 200 shares, over 600 comments. Some very positive. I hope you find a way. So really engaging with the emotion behind her story. But a problem that we were having with our ads was that everyone initially was very much jumping to conclusions about who we're talking about when we talk about someone with a criminal record. And that was generally an issue we encountered. There's a lot of misunderstanding in society at large about who has a criminal record. And so interestingly enough, a lot of people have heard of the legislation, the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, but didn't have a good idea of what it meant. So a lot of people thought that meant that we had a good system and that only the people with the most heinous crimes had a criminal record. So it was an interesting combination of, there weirdly was awareness of this law, but complete misunderstanding about it, to the extent that everyone thought that we were talking about people who'd committed serious violent or sexual offenses, that kind of thing. So I think this ad did quite well because it reframed it as a young woman, and it reframed it as from the I perspective, and she says, I accepted my punishment and changed my behavior. Now I can't find work and contribute to society because of my record. So I think it meant that the people in the comments ended up engaging with her, or with empathizing much more with the situation. Help this woman now if she's sorry, she needs a break, way more empathetic than we've had on kind of give the girl a chance for F's sake, really, really like positive. Take her on, and if she should mess up, sack her, but give the girl a chance. Like, really, so this ad really got the kind of feedback that is super positive for our campaign. So that was great. So that one, but again, it didn't perform in terms of conversions, I believe, quite as well as the more political ones. So we were under £1, sort of 88 pence per conversion, but really up and down, as you see, and at times incredibly expensive. So a bit hit and miss.
No, I'm hesitant to poke the Facebook beast, but you could always change the date range so that it's like August 2021 to
Let's see if she gets angry. Oh God. Yeah.
Oh, would it? No, it would be 2022, wouldn't it? Sorry.
I don't know.
I'm losing track of the years.
It was actually, I think it was October 2022 that we started these ads. So if I do
Okay.
October to kind of January. Yeah, so they were on and off, as in I turned them on and off. Gosh. So yes, very up and down. At times we were getting quite a solid conversion cost, at times less solid to really quite destructive. So again, we hadn't found something that was like super consistent. And so I think that was a thing for us, is we really were just continually revamping. Things would really work for us sometimes, and then suddenly this one had some good times, had some bad times. This was another political ad. So one way or the other, we were always getting a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
And
signed and shared. That's what you want to see.
Yeah. But we also end up getting, you know, these kind of comments that are angry towards the government, and those tend to attract quite a lot of engagement as well. So it's kind of that balancing act of, we were trying to tap into that kind of feeling of unfairness, and that came from, you know, I said we, in our interviews with supporters, we identified unfairness was a really strong like value that they held. So this highlights that unfairness. You know, the idea of, we call this ad set is called One Rule for Them. So one rule for them, another for the average Joe. But there's that balance of doing it without, you know, recruiting entirely an audience that just has complete mistrust of government and isn't willing to engage with them. So I think that was the first big break that we had in terms of getting us from sort of £3 to £6 per conversion to, at a good time, under £1, and then sort of we'd stop them when they got to about £1.60. And then in our most recent one, so I think, you know, we've been trying so much with the same audiences, and at this point we we were using a lookalike audience. So once the Facebook changes to targeting came in, we were no longer able to target on basically any of the things we've been using for detailed targeting. The only one remaining was an interest in like charitable organizations, but everything else had pretty much been completely wiped. I mean, literally, I think everything else was wiped. So, but luckily we had enough conversions at that point to form a lookalike audience. So these ones were with a lookalike audience. But we'd been trying different variations, and we seemed a bit stuck on what still wasn't quite a satisfactory cost per result. And so we decided to redo an audience test, and I tried something quite radical, which was to do a completely targetless audience, as in I did England and Wales, because that's the jurisdiction that our campaign works in. And I did 18 to 65, all genders, all English. And it went quite well. So this audience, this one was a Matt Hancock ad, as you can see. And it was while there was all that, you know, massive public outrage around all kinds of things to do with him. But I think at the time when we did this, he just sort of set up his media company, and there was just a lot of anger around him being an MP, but also being media and earning money. And he'd just been on I'm a Celeb. And so I decided to try another political ad. We hadn't done one on Matt Hancock before, I don't think. And so we tried that one. and as I said, did it with the widest audience possible. Really just, we didn't want anyone under the age of 18, and we didn't want anyone not in England or Wales. So we started out with very low costs per complete registration, at its lowest 22 pence, and the average for an opted in email address was between 50 and 60 pence.
That's just extraordinary. That's so good.
I mean, it was just so sudden. Like we'd been so comfortable using our lookalike audience, but I was just like, give it a go. And I mean, I'm not really sure why such a wide, I mean, it's literally the widest audience. It's like 40 million plus. But it just really worked well for us. And because it was working well, and because I knew that they tended to lose efficiency over time as the news kind of passed, I upped the budget significantly. And when I upped the budget, we didn't see a significant drop. I think it was actually here that I upped the budget. So it actually got cheaper momentarily. And then as expected, it started to creep up again. But even at its most expensive, it was still, around.
Still half the cost of what we would expect usually.
Yeah. And we ended up with over 2,000 petition signs. And so I'm not good at maths off the top of my head, but on average, 40% opt-in. So a lot of new supporters.
About 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah. And that ad looked like, one sec. And simultaneously, as I said, I still did do an ad that wasn't political, and it did much better with this audience as well. We can look at that in a sec. So I added a few things on this one, although this is a bit outdated now. We now have over 10,000 signs on our irresistible law petition.
Fantastic. 10,000.
Which started at 0 before we started the program, obviously, because we created the petition for the program. And I guess we'll look at the irresistible law in a sec.
Yeah.
So same structure as before. One risk lives in the pandemic, the other protected pregnant women from attack. Guess who got criminal records? So we knew that worked. It was just an audience test this time. Same image, same kind of big stop scroll kind of bright thing. I added this, which was a sort of social proof in the ad itself. I had a bit of a theory that I don't know, that even because people get so nervous around, especially our audience gets very nervous around privacy and data protection as well. I thought there may be people who weren't clicking because they were concerned about what we do with their data. We had previously on very old ones had people comment spam, like something about it made them think that it was sort of spammy. And so to try and allay, is that the word? Allay those concerns?
Yeah.
I thought I'd add the social proof right in there. So they knew that 7,000 people were already doing it. Again, we had a lot of engagement, a lot of shares, a lot of comments. Interestingly, with this wide audience, someone felt politics shouldn't come into it, which was interesting, but still signed and shared. Signed and shared, signed and shared. Same thing happened to me.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this was something we've dealt with all these ones. Our political ads tend to have people sort of, and I understand why, but because we are directly comparing them and saying, guess who got a criminal record? And obviously our point is no one should have a criminal record, or like both of these people shouldn't have a criminal record. But we have had pushback with people being very much like, yeah, put him in jail, which is not like what we're going for. But again, it's that balance of like getting the attention without making people too punitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of engagement and just worked really well for us with this audience. Our other ad was still good in terms of cost, just hard when it's being compared to the Matt Hancock one, because that was so low cost. But this was still
even so
still
that's
good.
Still way better than the the previous one before you did the kind of whole audience revamp.
Yeah, this one didn't last very long because I think I ended up putting it in a different one sec. I ended up putting it in a different ad group so I could do a A/B test on them. So yes, it didn't stay quite that good. But still under £1. And then once it got significantly higher, I stopped it. So this is what I mean, like, it's been very stop-start for us. There's not been a single ad that we can just like let loose and have it continue on. But this ad looked like this. Again, it used the I word to not only have it be a story, but have it be like really help someone empathize with the person telling the story. I think that's been a big thing. And again, we have the Elfie Contributing Society and the Hobbity providing for their family, but then we're really focusing on this quote. And also she says, you know, I've had 11 years on benefits because of it, which just really taps into the idea that like she doesn't want to be doing this and it would be better if she wasn't having to do this. Quite a lot of engagement, not as much as our political ones. Mixed comments on this one.
It shows that people are being actually quite thoughtful about it.
Yeah. But also misunderstanding, you know, like this isn't strictly true. And I think that's something, as I said, we've had a lot of here with people having some understanding of this issue, but not quite enough. And obviously with Facebook, it's best if you can keep things short and to the point, but the criminal records, the nuances of the criminal record system are such, they really don't lend themselves to things being short and to the point. So I think we've just had to make that sacrifice here, that we're not able to fully explain like the nuances of it. And so we're really relying on like the people who either know something about it, have personal experience, or are willing to kind of learn more, will kind of click through and learn more. Yeah. So that was the most successful campaign we had. We got in a huge number of new supporters, and we've now, so since the beginning, as I said, when we first started this program, we were just under 1,000. It was about 960, and now we're just over 5,000 supporters. And yeah, 10,000 petition signs. And the next stage, what we're doing now, so well, let's should I talk about the irresistible lure we used?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is our website, and this is the irresistible lure that we've been using. It stayed pretty static the entire time. We did do a test. We tested this petition or hand raiser against a quiz, which was kind of like surprising things you might not know about the criminal record system. And one of them was, for example, like click which of these would give you a criminal record. And one of them was like watching Bake Off without a TV license. Like, could that give you a criminal record? Fishing in the wrong place, could that give you a criminal record? It just didn't do anywhere near as well as the hand raiser. So we've stuck with the hand raiser this whole time. The only changes we've made to the hand raiser, at one point I did some minor edits to it because I'd learned more, and some of our wording kind of wasn't really in line with our campaign messaging. So that's changed. But again, we start with stories, and then we talk about the situation, and then what we want to do. It's quite short, actually. It doesn't have a huge amount of info in it. Again, because the criminal record system is so complex that if you start getting into the weeds of it, it can really become just very confusing, and there's a lot of jargon involved. And in order not to use the jargon, you have to get very, very wordy. But we've hosted it on our website so that people can click around and find out more. And we have had quite a lot of people ending up signing up, not via this petition, but just via our regular sign up to our newsletters link after the fact. So I think some people have kind of clicked about. This is our sign up page. We use Action Network, and so there's a limit to how much customization we could do. So we would really like to have better opt-in language that makes people more want to opt in. Unfortunately, we can't change this. But yeah, very simple. And we've got the social proof up here so they can see that more than 10,000 people have signed the petition. we've just been doing this irresistible law basically this whole time, other than that very first test. We're now doing another test, which is this whole time we were thinking about trying to implement some kind of funnel and using some video content as an initial kind of plug. We're just starting that test, as in I literally currently have our very first video ad running. Ooh. And then I'm going to create the audience to kind of retarget those people. The video ad links to this podcast that we made, which asked the question, are criminal records fair? We don't expect people to listen through the podcast, but for those who are interested, it might make them feel like they're kind of getting something out of engaging with us. And we also just have the same clip. This is the same clip that's in the ad and a bit more information. And then at the bottom, a supporter quote and a link to take action, so that we haven't had a lot of action coming through this. But obviously that's not necessarily the point of this ad. We're going to be retargeting those who've watched it, and we'll see what happens. But that's underway. It hasn't happened yet.
Ooh, exciting. Oh, well, how do you feel now you've gone from just under 1,000 people on your email list to like how many on it now? Is it 6,000?
Just over 5,000. Yeah.
Just over 5,000.
Yeah. It feels good. I mean, it's strange because obviously you have there's people in the world with hundreds of thousands, but for us, I mean, it's a however many 100% increase, which is, we'll take it. And we've alongside some campaign activities that have meant we're reaching out and asking sort of for more interaction from our supporters, we've really seen more of a community developing. Actually, we recently had we have an event coming up at the House of Lords, and we invited some of our supporters to attend. We had 3 spots, and we had like over 60 people wanting to attend an in-person event, and we only had 3 spots to give. And especially when you're talking about a supporter group that is predominantly people with lived experience of the criminal record system who don't necessarily want to advertise that fact or be somewhere in person, that was kind of really impressive. And that wasn't even sent to our whole list. So we've definitely seen a lot more happen with more people on the list.
Fantastic. Yeah, I remember talking to you about that right at the start and saying that it's, we despair of getting anyone to talk to their MP because no one wants to admit this, no one wants to talk about it. And now to have 20 people per place talking to people in the House of Lords, that's quite something.
Yeah.
Amazing. Is it what would you say to someone who's thinking about doing the Next Gen program?
I mean, I just think it's so worth it. And what I've also found is I went to the ECF forum last year and was chatting with people, and I very much thought of myself as a newbie. I was like, I'm still in the middle of this program, like I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to digital advertising. And I chatted with so many people who were like, wait, what was that you were saying again? Wait, how did you do that? And I was like, what? Okay. So I feel like you get a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak. And it really, I mean, we've also, the sort of process of going through surveying, interviewing, testing is something that it's now, I'm using it in other areas of our work as well, of that, just kind of that way of thinking and that way of going through it. And it has been something, obviously we've had so many iterations at this point that I've been able to go back, have another think, it's kind of an iterative process, and it very much lends itself to being iterative. And we've been now doing various iterations for 18 months, almost 2 years. And we've definitely sort of seen improvement upon improvement. So yeah, I mean, go for it. Do the program.
Fantastic.
It's great. Yeah. And I think also in our organization, we're so small that I'm the only person who did the program. But I know that some of the other people I've spoken to on Q&A, we could have had multiple people doing the program together. And I think that would have been great. I mean, our team brainstormed on at the places where we really needed to brainstorm. But I certainly think that, you know, for a bigger team with a couple of people doing it together, you know, you would just reap such rewards. But also through the Q&As, obviously I said we did do that external brainstorm for new ideas, and we brought in people we've met in the Q&A, and everyone was really friendly and helpful in kind of helping us think things through. So even for a small organization, it was really just so much value.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. And I know this is just going to be so encouraging and helpful, not just for people, you know, on the Donor Whisperer list, but also people who are just in the program, because so many people are so curious about how to use the values in their messaging and how to make a successful lure. And this is just, it's just a really beautiful evolution of how you went from that initial disappointment of like £15 per sign up to like 50p or 60p.
I would say Instagram's still not working for us, I think. Like,
okay.
Instagram's still a no-go, but yeah, certainly on we certainly had a massive evolution on Facebook.
Yeah, so you're still not finished, because there's still that, you know, still working on the channels, so there's still more room to grow. So great. Well,
and now
thanks,
now we have some video assets. I hate the word assets, but now we have some video. We can start experimenting on YouTube, and there's kind of all sorts more things to keep testing and keep working on.
Okay, grand. All right.